As I was introduced, I made my PhD in Sydney University in 1991, supervised by two professors. One is the late Professor Alan Crown from Sydney University, and the other one is Professor Aaron Oppenheimer from Tel Aviv University. That was before the internet era, and therefore it was all went by mail. I felt sometimes very lonely doing this topic. I chose a very difficult one just by innocence, not knowing how difficult it was. I chose the topic of the religious expressions of Jewish women during late Second Temple period and Mishnah and Talmud periods. But also, being isolated where I was, I could take my time and make my research without being influenced strongly by different people who served different agenda. So in a way, I benefited from the loneliness, but on the other hand, I was quite isolated in my work. Did not belong to any group, intellectual group of scholars who dealt with this field. I took age learning gerontology because I felt that there is great similarities between the way women were perceived and the way all people were perceived, and now I extended it in one lesson that I give here to disabled people and other minorities. Mainly, the common denominator between all those is the lack, their voice is not heard by the authoritative scriptions, writings. Now the topic today is writing Jewish women history in Israel. I call Israel, but normally you will find it Palestine, under Roman rule, and the subtitle is Israeli Scholars Writing Jewish Women History, an examination of the relationship between religious affiliations, Talmudic background, and gender in the study of history of the Mishnah and Talmud period. And also, if I have time, I'll suggest a different way of reading. Not that it is my original way, but through the many readings that I did, I ended up understanding that this might be a good way to take out of the rabbinic sources a lot more insight and understanding on the lives of other people. I will discuss it in 4 points, and I read for you the points so that I hope I stand in the time limits. Many historians who investigated that period precluded women and women's history from their work, treated their position in society according to accepted norms and practices of religious circles of their own time, of the historians' time. They were very strongly influenced by their own education and attitude to women. Therefore, a pioneer historian like Dalia alone didn't give in his own lectures even one chapter to women, although he mentioned them occasionally, but not, they weren't the focus of any of his lectures. The second point that I'm going to talk about is the difficulties expressed by Israeli historians, women, in getting into the field of research, which is mainly held by men. And that is coming later on when I'll discuss this point. 3 is I demonstrate an opposing a common research approach that considers the rabbi's views and practices as sufficient to write Jewish history of the Mishnah and the Talmud. I will present the way Adiel Shermer in his book treats rabbinical sources to expand his views about the institution of family that he researched in that particular book. And the last one is my suggestion, which says that by reading the textbook, the subtext, and by listening to the many voices in rabbinic literature, one can acquire a richer view about society and social norms and practices of that particular time. But we have to put aside the loud voice, the loud rabbinic authoritative voice, and search for the inner voices, especially in the Midrashim. So these are the 4 points, and I will begin now with men historians excluded women. Leading historians of Jewish history of the time of Mishnah and Talmud in the Israeli academies had a Talmudist training and religious education in their background, and I can name a lot of them. Such background gave them a better access to the literature, its language, and the methods of deciphering a Talmudic discourse, and caused those who lacked it to admire their abilities, especially the women students of those professors, and I was one of them. I admired Aaron Oppenheimer's proficiency with Talmud texts. These scholars consider the rabbis and their ideology as representing the majority of the Jewish people of Israel, and there was no argument about it. Only later in the development of the history of that particular period, there were scholars who claimed that rabbinic literature, one of them is Israel Levine, who claimed that the rabbinic statements do not represent the majority of the people. Often the rabbis took leadership. They always behave as if they were the leaders of the people and the spokesmen of the Jewish people under Roman rule. But in a matter of fact, they weren't. There were other groups in society whose voice is not written, and that's make it difficult to learn about them. Women who were recognized by tradition as helpers of men and as people, women, as depended on them, not only socially but also economically, emotionally, and morally, did not gain any special investigation by those historians. And I read like Professor Oppenheimer wrote a book about Am Haaretz, the common people, the laymen, and he had a chapter in different pages of his book. He described relationship between women of Am Haaretz and wives of sages, but he never thought that that's an issue of research, to see what was the role of women, the sage's wife, in regard to the rest of the society, the neighbors, the friends, or other circles in society. Now, I want to give my example about this attitude that I mentioned before by checking the article written by another prominent and prolific scholar, the late Shmuel Safrai. And the article name is "The Obligation of Women in the Fulfilling of Commandments in the Teaching of the Tanaim." This was published in Tafshinun Hey, which is 1995, isn't it? So it's quite late. After a long and detailed Talmudic deliberation about women, exemption from the fulfilling of commandments which are time-related and from other mitzvot which are related to Torah learning, his conclusion is women were exempt from fulfilling these mitzvot and also from the mitzvah of Torah learning because of social forces that made it impossible for them to do both, keeping the mitzvot and looking after their houses and families. He especially comments that it is a practical approach and not any fundamental view about women's position in regard to the mitzvot. it sounds very elegant way to describe why women are exempt or excluded of certain activities, but searching in later years, I realized that the only one who commented in a similar venue was Abu Dharam in the 14th century, rabbi from the 14th century, when he came to explain it. But there is no any trace to such explanation in the Talmudic literature. And yet it was accepted and repeated by different people because it sounds okay. It didn't offend women's intellectual abilities to participate in anything. So he just said it's the hardship, and he also mentioned something that as a gerontologist, I can tell you it's not correct. He said that women's life was shorter and harder, and there is no any reference to any of it. So it's one example, but I could show you a lot more. Time limits. I'm going to talk about the second point, about Israeli women historians that encounter difficulties deriving from the nature of the sources and the religious values attributed to the learning of the sources. They also express discontent with the limitation of the subject. Ilan Tal, for instance, a very respectful scholar, and one of the first Israelis who tried to write a history of women as such, not through religious studies and not through any other field, but as an historian to write Jewish women history. And she claimed that after she published her first book, she felt limited by the subject. Again, it's family against its marriage, against the divorce and the widow and so on and so on. The topics were not interesting enough. Another scholar in Israel, a new one, young one, Noam Vered, claimed that if you deal with women's studies, with women issues here, you become a second-rate scholar.
Or you're perceived that way.
Yeah.
You're perceived this way, but you will be treated that way too, in regard to positions as well. But now I want to bring an example by the words of Shulamit Valer, a scholar from Haifa University, that in 2001 wrote the following. It seems that the only chance for women to break the bastion of halakha studies, she meant in Israel, is through universities. But even there, the studies of halakha are in the hands of men involved in rabbinic religious world. She suggests that women should get into the field of text research and the history of the text, but expresses her doubts about the success of women to enter into the study of the legal aspects of the halakha and also to enter into the field of historical research from two main reasons. One, the nature of research, which requires expertise in the text that many women are lacking. That's how she felt in 2001. I mean, reading rabbinical sources. And the other, she felt a disadvantage by trying to get into field held by men scholars. Now, about Ilan Tal, I already said, so I don't repeat about it here. I want to, do I have still, sorry, what about time? I didn't take my time. It's okay? Huh? Okay. My third point is analyzing shortly a different approach that was presented by Adiel Shermer, who wrote a history work about, he called it Male and Female, he created them, you see, choose that verse from the Bible. Jewish marriage in the late Second Temple and Mishnah and Talmud periods. He explains that he opposes the views that consider the rabbis as the leaders of the Jewish people, which mostly acted in accordance with the rabbis' teaching and followed their rulings. He also felt that one cannot learn about social reality simply by describing the directive and concept of the sages about social institutions. In his case, he meant the family, the marriage. In his writing, he utilizes methods of inquiry taken from social studies. He followed Rubin from Bar Ilan. By doing that, he outlays more expansive view on relationship between men and women of the period under investigation. And in the spirit of this approach, I would like to demonstrate for you a certain reading, which I say it's not my original way, but this is the way I found it very useful to read rabbinic sources. It's a midrash. I want to add one more thing that I didn't say. Most women scholars in America and in Israel looked at Tanaic literature and not past it. Some of them ventured a little bit to the Palestinian Talmud with different aids, but the Babylonian Talmud remained almost untouched. Only Shulamit Waller, as far as I know, dealt with Babylonian Talmud. Like Wegner, Rosemary Wegner, wrote about the woman position. In the book of Mishnah, she didn't even venture to go to the Tosefta, which is a book written by the Tanaic, by the same scholars. Now, I suggest, as I said, listening to the many voices and look at the subtext, because sometimes from there we can learn more about how women were perceived in one way, and second, what role they had according to rabbinic literature. Everything is rabbinic literature. It's hard to, we can't find any original writing about women, not even the book of Judith, which some people attribute it to women, a woman writer. Now, the story I choose is a bit sad. It's the story of the mother and her 7 sons, which is taken from Eicha Rabbah, Vilna, and Parasha Aleph. There are many, many parallels to this story, but parallels can be divided to 2, the Israeli one, Palestinian one, and the Babylonian one. Eicha Rabbah is an Israeli one. And I only read parts of it. I read it in Hebrew first for the music and second for the will interpret it. The story is Adrian, the Emperor Adrian captured the woman and her 7 sons. Woman and 7 sons, and the story of the martyrdom is based on Hashmonaean book. But here it gives a different turn to the story. The boys, everyone by his own turn, argue with the emperor about the God, the appearance, influence in the world, and punishing his own Hasidim. But I want to listen to 2 voices only. The mother voice and the nation, people of the nation's voice, which appear in the story. So the majority of the story, as I said, is a scholastic argument about God and his influence in the world. But now, when the last boy, the 7th boy, is going to be executed, it says, no, I'll read it in English, I'll translate it. The mother said, please, Caesar, Emperor, give me my son and I'll hug him and kiss him. The boy was given to her and she breastfed him, which to my opinion is the most motherly contact with a baby. The child, according to rabbinic sources, was 2.5 years old in a few hours. And then she asked to be killed first before the emperor said, I don't listen to you because it's written in your Torah that you will not slaughter ox or a lamb, him and his son at the same day, which is terrible, horrible. And there is a voice there that told him, you stupid person, have you completed all the mitzvot of the Torah that you are worried about this one? Now, immediately he ordered to kill the son, and the mother hugged the son and cried and said, listen what she said. She told him, Bni lech etzel Avraham avichem. In most versions is Avraham Avinu. That's the normal way we say it, נכון? She chose to say Avraham avichem. ואמור לו, in the Babylonian text, it appears more Avraham avichem. כך אמרה אמי, and now I translate, don't be smug about yourself and your deed. Because, and don't say, I build Mizbeach, one altar. You build one, don't say, I build one altar and sacrifice my son Yitzchak. Look at our mother. She built 7 altars, she sacrificed 7 sons in one day. You are the experiment, and I am the deed. And she hugged and kissed him, and then the boy was executed. And then you hear the voice of Umot HaOlam, the nation of the world, shouting, screaming, what are their God is doing to them, that they are killed for his name every hour. What is it all about? And a few days later, the mother went crazy and jumped from a roof and died. Now, I hear in the mother's words, in the choice of words, it's a man writer, it's a rabbi who taught this midrash. It wasn't a woman who wrote it, but there was a purpose to it. And I hear in the mother, I will conclude by saying this text might be considered a subversive one, as it puts in contradictions the feelings expressed by the mother and the question asked by Umot HaOlam, what their God is doing to them, that they are being killed on his name every day. With an awesome, it put it in contradiction with an awesome and heroic event of martyrdom. And I wondered for many times, I sort of looked at it again and again. I started dealing with it many years ago. Why would a man rabbi put those words in the first place? It's quite, in a way, blasphemous. And it appears that the storyteller, to my opinion, I sort of assume nobody writes it. It appears that the storyteller gives a voice to the most inner feelings and doubts that might prevailed or were raised amongst the audience that might have suffered from the Roman oppression and straight directly after Bar Kokhba revolt. So it becomes like a social psychologist that voice out the inner feeling that people wouldn't like to say it. And yet, by doing so, he gave a role to the mother, which is no different to the general attitude to women. She is all milk and love and hug, and yet she is objecting to one of the most sacred events in Jewish life. So I believe, איך אומרים, מחתרתי, underground, provocative, subversive, as I said, hidden ideas below the authoritative rabbinic text. Now, to sum it up, I feel that an historian of the Mishnah and Talmud period, I disagree with Ilan Tal that there is no room to more research. It's all family and family life, and you put it quite nicely in your own point, that there's a lot more field to investigate rather than that. An historian of the Mishnah and Talmud period has to acquire the expertise of reading rabbi sources, and I'm telling you, it became easy in late years by having the responsa of Bar Ilan, where you can have a library on one disk. The other thing that I recommend, or I'm doing it, searching in rabbinic text clues for other experiences and listening to other voices which are often hidden within the subtext. And the last point, which to my opinion can lead women history of that period, is to focus on social interaction that involve men and women alike, and also other segments of society that are not represented by the circles of the sages and their teachings. And the last thing that I want to add is, as a lecturer, as a teacher of gender studies, women history, I feel that I have to put a lot more room to the experience of men. And often I start my lectures, my year, by saying it's very lonely to be up there in the top of the pyramid. And then we can see a lot of proofs to that. תודה רבה.